Look how the story changes when the spotlight hits back. What started as a smear campaign against George Pickens has now come full circle. The same organization, True Edge Sports, that shamelessly pushed out damaging narratives and misleading emails about the man, is now walking it all back. Remember those claims? That Pickens supposedly abandoned kids in Pittsburgh? That he backed out of a camp and left families hanging? Yeah, those headlines didn't age well. Turns out, when you throw dirt at someone without telling the full story, you better be ready for the blowback. Because when fans, media outlets, and real football people started digging deeper, the truth started surfacing. And it wasn't a good look for True Edge Sports. Not at all. They wanted to drag Pickens' name through the mud, yet they weren't even issuing proper refunds to the parents whose kids were impacted. Think about that. An event that was supposed to be for the kids ended up turning into a PR disaster because of how they handled it. But now? Oh, now their tune is changing. We covered the start of this saga a couple of days ago. If you missed it, you can find the full breakdown on our channel. But right now, we need to talk about this latest twist, because sometimes, just sometimes, when people get held accountable, it actually works. And in a world where folks love to dodge responsibility, sometimes you gotta apply pressure the right way. Now, let's break down this latest statement. NFL insider Jordan Schultz reported that True Edge Sports has released a formal message addressing what they now admit was a very overblown narrative. Their words, not ours. They're admitting their initial statement about George Pickens pulling out of the camp was, and I quote, inappropriate. Let that sink in. They're not just backtracking. They're finally acknowledging what so many of us already knew. This wasn't about Pickens letting anyone down. This was about a rush to judgment, about people trying to write a headline before knowing the facts, about trying to paint an athlete as a villain, when in reality, the organization dropped the ball. And now, they're scrambling to clean it up. Now, before we dive any deeper, let's take a moment, especially as Cowboys fans, and realize something powerful. This moment, right here, it's a reminder of the influence fans can have when we push back against narratives that don't sit right. When the truth matters, when a player is being wrongly dragged, and when the media gets it twisted, we can push that scale back toward balance. But first, let's look at the actual statement that just came out from True Edge Sports. This is what they had to say. At True Edge Sports, we take pride in fostering strong relationships with the athletes, families, and communities we serve. Recently, a statement was issued regarding our scheduled youth camp with George Pickens that did not accurately reflect the full scope of communication or the context surrounding the event. At no point did George communicate with us directly, and our communication with George's representatives led to confusion about the camp status and its future direction. Regrettably, the language used in our original message mischaracterized George's intent and actions. While our frustration stemmed from uncertainty surrounding the event, it was never our intention to publicly question George's professionalism, integrity, or his commitment to the community. We now understand that the tone and implications of our message were not only inappropriate, but inconsistent with our values as an organization. We recognize that George was navigating a significant career transition during this time, and that his team maintained open lines of communication with us. Now look, there are a lot of words in there, but let's not pretend like this wasn't a direct response to the public pressure that followed their original statement. Fans weren't silent. People called it out for what it was, a weak attempt to place blame on a player who was in the middle of a life-changing professional moment. Let's be real here. How can you criticize George Pickens for not showing up to a community event when, at that exact moment, he was being relocated, pulled from his familiar surroundings, and thrust into a brand new NFL chapter? You're talking about a man trying to stay focused, manage logistics, prepare mentally and physically, and yet the headlines tried to spin it like he was skipping out on kids. That's where narratives get dangerous, and that's why this course correction matters, because it shows what happens when fans, not just of the Cowboys or Steelers, but fans of the game, Speak up and demand better from the institutions that represent the sport. And like I said from the very beginning, how do you even try to question George Pickens' integrity? How do you question his commitment to any community, especially when that chapter is already closed? Let's be clear. George Pickens is no longer part of the Steelers community. That door is shut. His commitment now lies with the Dallas Cowboys, the DFW area, and the great state of Texas. That's where his focus is. That's where his energy belongs. So for people still trying to guilt trip him over a Pittsburgh event, it's time to let that go. The truth is, players like Pickens pour into their communities all the time, especially in places like Southlake, where athletes often get involved with youth programs. But whether it's Southlake or Fort Worth or Frisco, this is his new home. This is his new fan base. These are his people now. So why is anyone still acting surprised that his priorities have shifted? And as for True Edge Sports, don't start backpedaling now. You made your move. You tried to profit off the name of a player going through a major NFL transition. You tried to frame him as unreliable, but the internet doesn't forget. Because let's not gloss over what you originally sent to those families. The email said, and I quote, "Dear families, thank you for your patience in regards to the George Pickens Youth Football Camp scheduled for June 28th at Highmark Stadium. As many of you know, George Pickens was traded to the Dallas Cowboys on May 7th. Immediately following the trade, our team contacted George's representation to confirm whether he would still honor his commitment to the Pittsburgh event." Hold on right there. Immediately following the trade, that's when you reached out? Not even giving him 24 hours to breathe? No time to settle into a new franchise, connect with his coaches, align with his training schedule? None of that? That's not professionalism. That's impatience. That's trying to lock down a name on a flyer before you've even had a real conversation. And now you're surprised that things got miscommunicated? Look, George Pickens had way bigger priorities after that trade. New team, new system, new expectations. The Cowboys didn't bring him in to babysit his former commitments. They brought him in to make an impact, on the field and off, for this team, this city, and this fan base. So no, he didn't abandon anyone. He just moved forward. And some folks clearly weren't ready to accept that. Let's be real for a second. When someone goes through a major transition, like getting traded to a brand new NFL team, that's not just a job change. That's a life change. New playbook, new expectations, new location, new responsibilities. So if you decide to immediately reach out to a player right after that happens, especially for something like a youth camp, and things don't go the way you expected, that's on you. This entire situation could have been handled with patience and professionalism. Instead, True Edge Sports jumped the gun and made assumptions. Let's look at their original words again. "We were promptly assured that George remained committed to the camp and intended to show up for the families who had registered. Based on that confirmation, we communicated this directly to you via email and text on May 9th. Okay, fine. But now pay attention to what came next. Unfortunately, as of last week, True Edge was notified by George's team that he has decided to walk back on his word and is no longer interested in attending the camp." Walked back on his word? Really? Let's not twist this. His team gave you a status update, not George himself. And at that point, George was likely still sorting through the biggest career move of his life. The man was traded to one of the most high-pressure franchises in football. You think his first priority was to circle back to a third-party camp organizer? There's a good chance his own reps didn't even get a full update from him yet, because he was focused on football, relocation, and aligning with the Cowboys. But instead of giving it time, instead of approaching the situation with understanding, they made it personal. They said this: "His sudden decision to back out not only reflects a disappointing lack of accountability, but also shows a disregard for the families and children who were excited to meet him." Now they're questioning his character. That's where the line gets crossed. George Pickens didn't owe them anything more than clarity, and that was coming in time. But what he didn't deserve was being labeled as unreliable or disrespectful to kids and families. It was an unfortunate scheduling issue, not a betrayal. It was a change of circumstances, not a moral failure. And just when you thought they were done, they wrapped it up with this. We are incredibly disappointed by his actions, and his actions do not express the goals or motives of True Edge Sports. That said, we are determined for this event to be a wonderful experience. Steelers tight end Pat Freiermuth has officially committed to stepping in, and we're actively speaking with other Steelers players. So now they're scrambling for a PR save, bringing in Freiermuth and others to keep the event afloat, which is fine. But it doesn't undo the damage of framing Pickens as the problem. Let's be real, he wasn't the issue. He was just trying to adjust to a whole new world in Dallas, and just when you thought they were done, they doubled down. True Edge Sports continued their statement, saying they fully intend to build out an exciting lineup that delivers value to every family. Okay, fair enough. But then, once again, they took another cheap shot at George Pickens. Let us say again, we are incredibly frustrated by George Pickens' lack of professionalism and his decision to abandon the commitment he personally confirmed after his trade. Wait, hold on. Personally confirmed? That's just not true. In the very same email chain, they already said they were talking to his team, not George himself. You can't have it both ways. Either he confirmed it or he didn't. And all your previous statements say it was his representatives, not the man directly. This entire thing smells like an emotional guilt trip. They keep repeating words like families and children, not because it adds clarity, but because they're trying to paint George Pickens as a villain in the court of public opinion. They're manipulating emotions, hoping people forget the timeline and the context. Then they say, "We've been forced to navigate this situation with zero notice." Zero notice? He was traded to a new team in one of the biggest markets in football. You don't think that maybe, just maybe, a few things might have slipped through the cracks while he was figuring out his entire new life? But the most frustrating part? After dragging George Pickens through the mud, they try to walk it back with an apology. "We apologize for the delay in this update. We worked tirelessly behind the scenes to pivot, replace talent, and solidify our new lineup before reaching back out." That's not an apology. That's damage control. And quite honestly, after what they said about George, after how they handled this entire thing, they don't deserve to work with NFL players again. The Steelers players stepping in for the camp? They should think twice, because this wasn't just a mistake, it was an attack on a player's name. You can't just walk it back and pretend you weren't trying to bury him. Let's be real. George Pickens didn't do anything wrong here. He got traded, and in the whirlwind of that moment, communication slipped. That happens. But instead of acting with grace or understanding, True Edge tried to twist it into a hit piece, and now they're reaping what they sowed. But here's what matters most: the response from the fans. Cowboys Nation stood up, fast, united, loud. We said this wasn't right. We flooded them with backlash. And guess what? Within 48 hours, they were already scrambling to take it all back. That's the power we have when we speak together, when we ride for our players, when we see through the nonsense, when we hold people accountable. So if there's one thing to take from all of this, let it be this. When Cowboys fans move as one, the NFL takes notice. The media takes notice. These shady organizations, they fold. We had your back, George, and we're not going anywhere. We're still here, still loyal, still them boys.